This chapter is a summary of enlightenment practice. The most practical consequence of enlightenment practice is equanimity. The word used here is samadhana. And equanimity isn't just about being unruffled. Equanimity means knowing where your best interest is. It means knowing what is worthwhile and what is nonsense. And it means directing yourself towards what is worthwhile. And the nonsense here is all the notions that we have concerning self, body, and external world. Realizing that all of these are simply notions, we direct ourselves to what isn't notional. And what isn't notional is our attention, our awareness. This, as far as we can tell, is the sole reality. This, which should be abundantly clear, is the sole reality. And enlightenment practice means turning to this. But there's habits built into us. You might believe these habits come from past lives. Perhaps we're genetically hardwired. These are what are called our latent tendencies, our psychological tendencies to believe in these notions of an external world, a self, a body, and so on. So we need to constantly subvert that tendency. If you're an enlightenment practitioner, this is what you're about. And this is the advice that we're being given. One should seek the company of the wise, who are one's own real well-wishers, and who are pure and friendly. Well, if you can have daily or direct contact with such people, that's great. But failing that, we have lots of videos on YouTube and wherever where this wisdom is freely available. Then one should water the seed of samadhi or meditation by means of hearing, reflecting on, and contemplating the scriptures, which bring about total inner emptiness and which are full of wisdom, pure and cool like nectar. So that inner emptiness is the emptiness of equanimity. It means not being bound by restricting notions, and all notions are essentially restricting. So this inner emptiness is emptiness of the belief of notions. Being aware of the precious seed of meditation or samadhi that has fallen in the field of one's mind, the wise man should carefully cherish and nourish it by means of austerities, charity, etc. You have to get to know your own tendencies. Get to know why you're not established enlightenment all the time. Is there irritability, resentment? Are these things common? In which case you can focus on them directly. What are the things that press your button? A particular instance of mine is trying to help somebody with their computer at a distance, either on the telephone or through internet messenger. You can't actually see what they're doing on the screen, and they don't know much about computers. It strikes me as hell on earth to have to work in one of these call centres where you're trying to help people with their computer problems. It's a feeling like you're embarking on a lost cause right from the start, and that this is a total waste of time. Why can't this person figure it out for themselves? It's a trivial example, but there's many of them. And if you've got the opportunity to look at that, actually the opportunity arises moment to moment. If you're not in enlightenment, then something like that is an operation. There's a two-pronged approach you can take to this. One is awareness of it, and the second is to go against it, to go against the grain. and to try to take delight in helping somebody with their computer. Look at all the assumptions. Make the effort. If somebody wants some help, give it to them. If you've got dependencies, people that you're close to, then try not to let the resentment build up. It's very easy for resentments to build up in close living quarters with people. Perhaps you could even devote yourself to somebody else's happiness. That's not a simple thing, because does that person's happiness mean you should just give them what they want? But anyway, having that as a priority is quite a nice thing to do. So this is described here by means of austerities, charity and so on. Austerities means not just piling on your own acquisitions, mental, intellectual, emotional or material. You're no longer feeding your own ego. When this seed begins to sprout, this is the seed of enlightenment, of equanimity, it should be further protected by peace and contentment. Sometimes the reaction to enlightenment is not one of bliss. This is the stereotype picture we have. There are many cases, especially in Zen, where there's a bit of a shrug. Is that it? So what? In a way, it's nothing special. But we can learn to appreciate it. I've mentioned before that spirituality is very much about awareness, appreciation. And this is certainly part of enlightenment practice. It's appreciating enlightenment and not appreciating it from giving it an intellectual nod of the head, but really feeling it. And so we have this statement here: when this seed begins to sprout, it should be further protected by peace and contentment. So we have peace and contentment, realizing that that is the nature of this equanimous enlightenment. At the same time, one should guard it against the birds of desire, attachment to family, pride, greed, etc., with the help of contentment. You don't abandon your family, but at the same time, you don't use your family as an excuse for not being here, for not being at the centre. Devoting yourself to the happiness and well-being of your family is fine, but you don't have to get caught up in the neurosis and paranoia that's often expected. There's a book by Frank Ferrudi called Paranoid Parenting. I haven't read it, but I think I've got some idea of where he's coming from. So we don't get caught up in that paranoia. We do what we need to do. We do what's conducive to happiness and well-being of the family. But we don't use it as an excuse for not being centered. We don't use it as an excuse to fuel anxieties and neuroses and paranoia. With the broom of right and loving action, the dirt of rajasic restlessness must be swept away, whereas the darkness of tamasic ignorance must be driven away by the light of right understanding. So rajasic restlessness is our passions and our neurosis and psychosis, and tamasic ignorance is our dullness. We stay on the ball.